Here comes Santa Claus. Here come. You guys know that I love universal basic income. It's fantastic. It's amazing. It's the greatest thing to ever exist. But realistically, it's an answer to a lot of the problems that we have nowadays. So I wanted to finally sit down and actually go through it. So we're going to go through it. And at the end, if you guys have any questions, I'll answer to the best of my abilities. So let's do this. So what is a UBI? Well, UBI is basically just a guaranteed income, but specifically the UBI that I'm working off of is Andrew Yang's UBI, which is $1,000 a month to everybody who's over the age of 18, right? Beautiful, amazing, free money for everybody. It's fantastic, right? Now, of course, the first question that people will always ask is, Papa Gut, how much is this going to cost? How are we going to afford this? What the hell is the matter with you? Are you an idiot? Well, the answer to that is, yeah, I am, but sometimes I can be smart. So the headline cost is about $3 trillion a year, right? Which is a ton of money. Right now, I think we collect about $3 trillion a year in taxes. We spend about $4 trillion. So we're already hitting about $1 million, or rather $1 trillion annual federal deficit. So of course this would inflate it, right? But there is a way to offset it, right? So how do we pay for this? There's basically three big ways that Andrew Yang has laid out. The first would be a value-added tax at about 10%. Right, groceries and clothing are excluded, just for context, right? So that would pull in about $800 billion a year, right? The secondly would be the economic boost from everybody receiving $1,000 a month, which is projected between $800 and $900 billion a year. So let's say we're at about $1.6 trillion. So we've cut about the cost in about half so far. Lastly, there is welfare. Lastly is welfare, incarceration, and homeless, right? So let me expand on that. Welfare-wise, the only way that you can collect a universal basic income is if you are not on welfare. So this is an opt-in program. If you want to maintain your welfare, that's fine. You can stay on it. But if you want to come off of or if you want the UBI, you have to come off of welfare, which is one of the big incentives for me as to why I support this system. It gets people off of welfare. Now, between welfare, the reduction in incarceration due to the fact that there's more opportunity, less homeless services needed, and even ER visits, we can get that down to, if we're being a little bit generous, about $800 billion, right? So that's about $2.4 trillion a year that we would be either collecting more money in or a reduction in pay in particular services. So we have about $600 billion left, which, while it is a lot, is something that we can work on reducing. Now, me personally, and this isn't something that Andrew Yang necessarily lies out, but I am somebody who would be very much in consideration of some form of a wealth tax. The reality is as much as I absolutely love capitalism, because I think that the way that capitalism works and incentivizes people to do better, there are flaws, and some of those flaws are wealth hoarding, especially to the very upper echelon. So wealth taxes are a great way to get some of that money down. Also, getting businesses to actually pay their taxes rather than them constantly dodging their taxes would be great. And also, there's a conversation to have about increasing the taxes on people who make a lot of money. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, Papa, that doesn't bring in a lot of money when you increase taxes on people. But the general idea of increasing taxes on people who are wealthy, more than anything else, is to get them to, generally, they'll pay themselves less, and that should trickle down. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Either way, we're left with about $600 billion a year. I don't think that that's something that we can't work on. I'm sure that there are ways to cut. One of those ways certainly is there are several. Most of the government has this thing where if they if they don't hit their budget for the year, they lose it. So most of the time, you're seeing massive wastes going on, right? So anyway, $600 billion, not unrealistic. If we reverse the Trump tax cuts, that's about $400 billion right there. So we're left with $200 billion a year. Really not something that would be difficult to deal with. So why? Why universal basic income? Well, there's a ton of different reasons, right? The biggest one that sold me, the last one that sold me, was the reality of there are jobs, and jobs are being displaced and wages are being driven down by technology. It's an unfortunate reality. We lost about $4 million manufacturing jobs. You're seeing wages stagnate. Truck driver jobs are a great for instance of that. You're seeing places like Amazon, which basically is technology, completely cutting out a quarter of malls with more to come. And that was before the coronavirus. You go to any grocery store, you'll see maybe one or two people on the self-check or on the checkouts, and then you got one person manning 4 to 8 self-checkouts. We're watching technology completely remove jobs. And the reality is that they're not going to be replaced with better jobs for all of those people, right? So for the instance of a self-checkout, of course you say, well, Papa God, now that there's self-checkouts, you're going to have somebody who mans those self-checkouts. Well, you're probably going to have one person per some mapped out territory that get paid over $100,000 a year. But if you're losing, let's say, 4 people per store at minimum wage, very quickly it's going to get offset. So you got one guy replacing 500 jobs. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. So yeah, will there be more better paying jobs? Sure, but there will be substantially less jobs in general, and that's a bad thing because people need money and to work. So that's the biggest reason why I am for it. Technology is still rising. We're seeing things like self-driving trucks. Now, of course, I don't think that we're ever going to see self-driving trucks without a human driver, or at least to be there in case the thing has an issue. But you can make the argument very much that a self-driving truck, even with a pilot in it, that pilot doesn't need to get paid as much money as a non-self-driving truck, right? You would pay them substantially less. This is the way that we're seeing jobs being paid less and less. For instance, GPSs. I know a lot of you guys don't think about it, but GPSs have made it much easier to perform many jobs, like taxi driving jobs and bus driving jobs. So now all of a sudden, it's more accessible for you to be able to perform those jobs, and that obviously would drive down the wages of said jobs, right? Now, some people say, well, why don't we just retrain these workers? Well, first of all, there aren't enough jobs. Second of all, there's absolutely no way you're going to retrain somebody who's a truck driver to become somebody who is, let's see, a coder. It's impractical. Coding is difficult. Not a lot of people can do it. And also, once you've spent like an entire career in a particular thing, you're definitely not going to be able to be retrained out of it. I touched on it. I don't know if I touched on this, but there's going to be a larger and larger disparity between high and low paying jobs. For context, I know a lot of people are big into Trump. Yeah, I think that Trump, he tried to fix the middle class problem, but frankly, it's not going to work. There are projections that say that Americans are going to lose a third of their jobs to automation. For more context, labor force participation rate's only about 63%. That means that 63% of able-bodied workers are either looking for work or are actually employed. It was roughly 90% like 20 or 30 years ago. We're losing jobs drastically. And you have places like Ohio, factory towns. And this is something some of you guys may know this, some of you may not. But there are entire towns that are completely dependent on factories. And once those factories shut down, shit out of luck, right? So those people go on to welfare or permanent disability, welfare programs. So there's no opportunity for them. We're already seeing a welfare state being generated. And UBI is intended to take us out of that welfare state, or rather deviate us away from it before it gets too expanded. Now, I just want to touch on something, and that is automation isn't inherently bad. I know it might sound silly, but honestly, the movie WALL-E, it could happen. I know it sounds silly, but honestly, that there's something there to be said that where robots and technologies are basically doing everything for people. But that's the key word, for people. There's literally no reason to exist other than to propagate human existence. And so as we create more technologies, that should be better for everybody. And while it is better for consumers, when people lose their jobs, they can no longer consume. And that's a big problem. But automation overall, higher productivity, cheaper products, but less working, less people employed. So we need to deal with that issue, which is where a UBI would come from. Now, what are the benefits? And don't worry, guys, we're going to get into the cons as well. Pros, cons, right? We're going to get into all of that. But what are the benefits? First and foremost, I come from this very, very much. It's good for small businesses. I know that sounds silly, but the alternative solution right now is some form of massive increase to minimum wage. I don't believe in a minimum wage increase. All it's going to do is make it more difficult for small businesses to stay afloat, as well as it's just going to incentivize bigger businesses that can afford it to gravitate faster towards technology. So it's a much better solution than minimum wage increases. And it also actually incentivizes decent workers to work for your business, right? Let's say minimum wage is $10 an hour in your area. So that's $400 a week, right? Or let's say you're working 40 hours a week. Now, honestly, I would even argue that we may not even have to do a traditional 40-hour work week. And just for context, there are studies being shown that reducing, I think it's in China or Japan, I think it's Japan, they're starting to suggest that 32-hour work weeks make people more productive. That was the word I was looking for. So we actually may be able to start cutting down our work weeks. But anyway, let's say you work a traditional 40-hour-a-week job and you're making $400 a week. What is that? $1,600 a month. Now, imagine getting an extra $1,000. You're now making $2,600 a month to do something on a minimum wage job. You're able to actually live reasonably comfortably, I would say, regardless of what state. It's going to incentivize good workers to come and work for these small businesses that have to invest a ton of money, usually through bank loans, actually are going to be able to make a profit, or rather they're going to have a paycheck to bring home. That's a big deal. I think projections are something like 5 years before a small business might start seeing an increase in their, or actually going to be able to see a paycheck. So this is really good for small businesses. It makes them more competitive. It's also really good for consumers because now consumers have more money. And we could definitely make the argument that a small business is going to be more expensive than a big business. But with more comfort space, with more money, with more power, we can actually start gravitating towards smaller businesses if we would like to. It gives us more economic power. Let's see. Oh, yeah, right. So moving on from that, there's a big thing I think that we all have conversations about. I know this might sound silly, but to me, a big issue, this is what offset a lot of programs. One of those programs would be some kind of a school program, right? We have a lot of, I would say that this is a better alternative to increase investments in schools. I know a lot of people talk about it because it provides opportunity, but I want to expand on that because I don't think people quite understand where I'm coming from. So this is one of those things where I really genuinely believe that the government tries to micromanage things. One of those ways would be some kind of a federal school program. Now, obviously, Common Core has failed rather quite a bit. Each state and each town has a different demand and a different need for different levels of intelligence. If you want to increase the level of intelligence in a particular community, it's going to take time. You can't just force them to catch up, right? The only federal program I would be for is some form of a Head Start program. I think that's tremendously positive. But overall, I'm more for providing community opportunity through universal basic income than providing individual opportunity through school increases. So let me explain, right? So here's what happened. Let's say you increase the schools. Let's say you increase money going to schools. Now, that doesn't account for the issues of parents not being able to be home because they have to work multiple jobs. But let's say your kids go there and they actually get through it. And a lot of these poor areas, students simply just don't go to school. They drop out. They get pushed through. They don't give a shit. But let's say it works, right? You're going to get out of that school. Let's say you decide to go to college, right? You're going to get an education. You're going to become very intelligent. And then you're probably going to leave the area in which you were raised in. Why? Because there's no opportunity there. So you're either going to leave the area completely, which is basically going to create this brain drain out of particular communities, making them overall less powerful. Or they'll find a job in that area, but they're going to end up moving out of the area and working there. It happens where I live. A lot of people live on Long Island, but they work in the city. And what happens is you take that paycheck from the city, and then you go on to Long Island, and then you pay taxes in the particular community that you work in, or rather that you live in, right? That's a big problem, right? That's a big problem because you're not refeeding the money back into the community. So my argument is if we implement the universal basic income directly into communities, it gives people specific individual opportunity. I would argue it would absolutely lower crime because it gives people other things to turn to. It's going to bring businesses in the area, big and small, because you're going to have safer communities and you're going to have more power, more money flow through those communities for different communities to suck up. For a lot of marginalized groups, such as Black Americans, it's going to give them the opportunity to actually save money and be able to push money through their own community. And then once all this happens, they can invest money into their own school increases afterwards. Right? That makes more sense to me. People have this idea that education equals money. And while that may be true, it actually is money equals education equals more money, right? New York doesn't have good education programs, or rather doesn't have a lot of money because of good education programs. They have a lot of education programs because of money. It all starts with the money. I would rather be a rather ignorant person making a decent wage than somebody very intelligent, not able to find a job. And that's a big deal. And that's something that people really don't consider when it comes down to it. Moving on to more benefits, we're going to get into some smaller ones that some people may not even think about. Honestly, if you're anybody in some form of an abusive relationship, whether you're LGBTQ, a woman, and even men, this gives you the financial ability to escape that. To escape that abuse. People don't consider it, but let's say the alternative to that would be some kind of like homes, battered women's shelters, battered LGBTQ shelters, things of that nature. Not only are those hard to access, especially in southern states that tend to be more bigoted. Actually, that's pretty much it. They're hard to access. They're hard to access and get to them. So imagine you're somebody who's in an abusive relationship in Alabama, but Alabama isn't going to give a shit. So all of a sudden, you're not going to be able to get to this shelter. This is a streamlined way to take money and put it directly into your pockets instead of micromanaging every single little thing, right? On top of that, honestly, it's going to reduce the stress of particular relationships, which is going to reduce the abuse. I know that's a tough take, but there are people who are abusive, and a lot of times that abuse gets charged up due to actual stresses in life. I know a lot of people don't want to consider that, but considering money is the main reason why relationships end, I imagine if we can mitigate that issue, relationships would end less and be less abusive overall. Also, for people out there who are nuclear family people, this would allow people to actually spend more time together. I know instances of people who I used to work with they would work a 40-hour job and then a 20-hour-a-week job, right? Just so they can bring in another paycheck. Imagine you're a husband and wife with 2 kids, right? And the husband works 2 jobs, the wife works 1 job and takes care of the people at home, or you can reverse that. It doesn't matter. So maybe the wife's working 2 jobs and the husband's working 1 job and taking care of people. If you instantly increase that household by $2,000 a month, all of a sudden, maybe the husband can quit one of his jobs, or the wife can quit one of their jobs, or maybe the wife can quit in general. You understand what I'm saying? It gives people the ability to stay home with their families. Right? You're also going to see, since this is a replacement for welfare, you're going to see less incentivization, did I say that right, of single motherhood, right? Right now, welfare basically says, hey, if you're a single mom, you're going to get more benefits. Well, if we just say, hey, here's a UBI, all of a sudden, you're not going to see more single motherhoods. You're going to see more families being pushed closer together. Moving on from that, there's also a lot of people, and this actually can they consider it a small thing. Well, actually, let's talk about self-medicating next. The reason I would argue that people self-medicate, whether it's through drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, or even eating, is because of depression. If we reduce those depressions, we'll reduce the necessity for coping mechanisms. Now, on that topic, a lot of people say, Papa, what happens if we implement a UBI and people just take it and spend it on alcohol or drugs? The reality is that might happen. However, I'm more concerned with the people who are not drug addicts now, but may potentially turn to them due to coping mechanisms, rather than people who are already on drugs. It's a hard take, but it's the reality. This I would argue, would prevent more people going on to and becoming drug addicts. So overall, in the long term, this would be a drastic positive. On top of that, with this, it would actually give people more time to sit down and make food. I know that's silly, and I know that there's a community aspect to that as well, and a cultural aspect. A lot of American cultures are very rooted in convenience, so they'll go to fast food restaurants, this, that, and the other. So, of course, there needs to be a cultural shift. But having more time to sit down and make your own food is going to be a drastic positive, all right? On top of that, more time with kids, less instability. You're going to see kids having less issues. When it comes back to schooling, universal basic income is actually better for schools than some kind of particular school increase. A lot of times when you see an increased school budget, they're going to buy some gadgets or bullshit computers. And I understand the necessity for people to learn computers. But I argue that teachers getting paid an extra $12,000 more a year is better for schools than a new TV. Why? Well, because teachers shouldn't have to work 2 jobs. Why is it that the person who you feel is responsible for the success of your child's life, why would you want them to work another job? I would want them to not work another job. I'd want them to be very happy, right? So not only is it going to get teachers to work harder and be less stressed in their actual day-to-day life, but it's also going to give you the opportunity to police your children to make sure they're actually going to school. And it's going to reduce the necessity for shitty social workers in schools, because there's going to be less problems at home because of the fact that we've cut a lot of these issues when it comes to financial constraints. I would argue more kids would go to school. I mentioned it before, but this would be drastically positive for the Black community. This is a direct way to propagate wealth within those communities. A lot of these communities specifically don't have opportunity, positive education. That's the problem, right? We talk about systemic racism all day long, but the reality is nobody wants to talk about a real solution. And while maybe you think I'm focusing too much on the financial aspect, I'd argue that the majority of the issue in Black communities come down to 2 things: lack of opportunity, lack of wealth, well, I guess a third thing, and particular cultures within those communities that do not advocate for people going to school. right? And those would be a branch of systemic racism, not only lack of opportunity, but also hatred towards the government for basically screwing people over who are descendants of slaves. So how do we do it? Universal basic income, and black communities are going to have to start re-educating themselves. Like community leaders are going to have to start saying, hey, we need to do the right thing, because the reality is that when a black kid does well in a black community, a lot of other black kids say you're just some white kid and they bully the shit out of them. I know it's a harsh take, but this is the reality of the world. And if we want to solve real problems, we need to talk about real solutions. Moving forward, though, this is also great for people like the LGBT community. People don't really consider this, but a lot of people who are LGBT had a lot of trouble finding jobs, especially back in the day, and they don't have the ability to develop some form of a pension. This would allow them to have something. Some kind of breathing room. It's not a perfect system, but it's something. We need to consider all these problems. Lastly, or actually not even lastly, another thing, and this isn't something that Andrew Yang has laid out, but this is something that me personally, I would be for on my version of universal basic income, is it reduces the incentive to come here illegally. The only way that you would get UBI is if you're here legally. Now, I'm fine with people on like some kind of a work visa or whatever getting it as long as you're here legally. But if you come here illegally, you don't get a universal basic income. It's going to decentivize people coming here illegally. Honestly, it's a factor, and it's one of the reasons why I think that this is a solution that can be embraced by both conservatives and progressives, because it solves a lot of the problems, or at the very least, it solves the most of each problem, which we can take a step further off of that point. On top of that, there is an issue, I would say, with a lot of people, especially middle-class workers, not really being able to have kids, and also having kids at a late age. Now, you guys may not understand this, but as women get older, their chances of having children with disabilities goes up. I believe it goes up right after 25. I don't specifically remember, but with a UBI, you would allow people to have kids earlier to reduce the likeliness of them being born with some kind of cognitive or physical disability. Again, I know it's a tough take, but it's something to consider. It'll allow families to start earlier and sooner. It will allow them to invest into or young kids to invest into schooling for themselves, which is another factor. And it allows parents to actually, I had a point there, but I just completely lost it. Oh, childcare. Anyway, onto the school aspect. A lot of people have been talking about nowadays, like, hey, we should do some kind of a socialized, schooling. Well, we already have community colleges, but here's the thing. This gives kids the ability to not have to work or reduce stressors, right? Let's say you have a poor person trying to go to school. They have to work, right? You got like this middle-class kid, they don't got to work. Poor kids have to work to go to school. So even if they get something, they get some kind of a subsidy from the government, they're kind of still shit out of luck, and they have less time to focus on what's important, which is schooling. This gives people economic access. This gives people more breathing space, right? So that is, for the most part, the benefits that I can consider, right? Everything that I think got everything. Now let's go on to the cons. I know a lot of people are already like, Papa, what are the negatives to universal basic income? Now, let's start right off. Everybody's asking, Papa, inflation, right? Papa, inflation. All right, so let's talk about inflation. First and foremost, yes, we're going to see inflation, right? Right off the bat, with a value-added tax at 10%, which is basically a 10% flat tax, you're going to see, companies offset that by increasing prices a bit. However, technology at its finest should also provide a solution to lowering wages again. Lowering costs again. Either way, yes, there's going to be an increase, but it's not going to be something that's so wildly increased that it's going to offset the positive of a UBI, right? A 10% increase to basically, we can say luxury goods, because foods and clothing are going to be taken out of that, isn't going to offset it, right? If you're making $40,000 a year right now, you're going to be making 52 instead. So maybe that 52 is worth something to the effect of 50%. I think that the spike in inflation due to a value-added tax is roughly 6% one time. It's nothing crazy. So $40,000 basically turns into about $50,000. You're making a huge amount of money. Now, back to the point of consumer products going up. So let's say like McDonald's might increase the cost of their goods. It's not going to get wildly out of control because consumers, generally speaking, there's a lot of competition within. That's what the positive of capitalism, right? So you're not going to see McDonald's say, oh, 10% increase. Well, or rather, hey, guy, people have a lot of money. Well, I'm going to double the price of my food. No, because Burger King's going to say, fuck you, I'm taking that money. Generally speaking, the consumer market should be able to work itself out. It's not something that I'm generally concerned with. I would also argue that one of the positives of Donald Trump was that he gave more people money, and he also kept the what the hell is it called? And he also kept interest rates low. Now, I know a lot of people may not know what that is. Simply put, the reason that you raise interest rates is because there's a lot of is to reduce the amount of money flow in the economy, right? When interest rates are low, people take out more money, they consume more, they spend more money into the economy, would generally cause inflation. However, Trump's proved that you can give people more money and keep interest rates low, and you're not going to see spikes in inflation. So Trump did actually a very positive thing there. I'm not worried about the consumer aspect of it. Now, what you probably would be more concerned with is more of the property aspect, specifically people who are living in apartments, right? What's stopping an apartment complex from increasing their prices like $1,000 a month? It's a big deal, right? It's something to consider. Here's the thing. Right? If your biggest concern is, well, won't property owners increase the cost of their property drastically to offset UBI, then you're looking at a huge issue, huge greed issue that kind of comes with capitalism. I would say that if you decide to increase, I would honestly just implement a program that says, listen, if you can't increase your prices to rent by a certain percentage, right? Like I said, inflation is not going to go up too much. So if your $1,000 a month apartment goes up, maybe $1,100 is reasonable. But, if they try to push it to 15, and fuck it, take their land and sell it off to some other private enterprise. Honestly, I believe in private land ownership. I believe in not giving the government too much power. But I mean, honestly, there's really no reason for, if our only issue is, hey, individual greed is going to siphon that money up, then clearly the issue is the individual greed. All right. Sometimes we need to shift the system. We can't just completely live in it ignorantly. So I wouldn't really be worried about those two things for those reasons that I said. Now, a big issue, and this is from a lot of you progressives, you're like, well, wouldn't that increase the cost of living for the poor? Maybe. I would argue that due to the implementation of a universal basic income, there would be a community economic expansion. You're going to see poorer communities. You're going to see tons of businesses flocking there, and you're going to see more job opportunities in existence. On top of the fact that people working two jobs won't necessarily have to work two jobs anymore. So you're going to see an expansion in jobs. So I would argue that most people who come off of this welfare are going to be able to find gainful employment, right? Maybe they won't. Maybe people who stay on welfare will have a problem. We could have conversations about giving them a temporary increase. But the reality of the situation is that this is supposed to get people off of welfare and working. That's kind of the thing. And to a lot of people who say, I don't know if it will or won't work, like I said, there are people who are on welfare right now. There's two types of people on welfare. There's people who want to be on welfare, and there's people who don't want to be on welfare. The people who don't want to be on welfare are going to come off of welfare and look for a job. The people who want to be on welfare are lazy. That's the reality, okay? If we provide opportunity to these communities and they decide they want to stay on welfare, fuck you, honestly. That's kind of your issue. And just for context, it's about $400. The average welfare recipient receives about $400 a month. So yeah, let's see if we have anything else. Yeah, we talked about there was a study, and this is something to bring up, that studied the implementation of universal basic income, and what it found was a reduction in desired work hours, which basically a reduction in work hours up to, I think, 20% in some people. That I don't see as an issue. Automation is offsetting jobs. Like I said before, you're seeing, I think it was Japan, who they're implementing 4-day work weeks, 32-hour work weeks. They're seeing increases in productivity. Right? We're gravitating towards fewer hours worked. That's kind of the way that's working. So, yeah. Lastly, I guess I'll touch on negative income tax really quick. Negative income tax is basically a UBI type of a deal, but it only has a positive impact on people who are poor. I think it still creates some kind of a trap, because if you live between that particular line, you're still going to get more stuff. I think that's an issue with welfare. That's the positive to UBI, is you get $1,000 regardless, so you might as well work hard to make more. But UBI also addresses the fact that the middle class is getting shit on, and they're having a reduction of wages. So UBI overall, beautiful poggers. That's what I wanted to say. That's what Santa Claus wanted to bring you today. Now, I know some of you guys are going to have some questions. So what I'm going to do is, if you have specific universal basic income questions, guys, I will pop into the Discord and you can ask your questions right now. Okay? If you would like. It's weird talking without the headset, I'll tell you that much. So, if you guys have questions, or you can ask them in here. You can ask them in this, if you'd like to. I'm going to pick my nose. I'm not sure if I got everybody's concerns, but if you want, do I feel if the U.S. implemented UBI, other countries will follow? Possibly. This might be. I haven't really thought of that. I'll give you guys a minute, and if you don't want it to, if nobody has any questions, then hey, successful Packers universal basic income. Go to the oh wait, I'm not in the interview room. Oh yeah, yeah. Everybody, if you want to line up, this is specifically about UBI. Let me play some alerts.
Daily bits.
Thank you. Oh, somebody says, do I believe that the top 1% deserve UBI? That's a good question. Deserve? Probably not. The thing is that you can offset their UBI increase simply by, implementing, wealth tax or a higher tax on their pay in general. I'm not really super concerned with that. Has any country or community implemented? I believe a couple have. They've tried it and they seem to have quite a bit of success. Alaska has a $1,000 to $2,000 a year UBI.
Papa, did you like the cheers I sent last night?
Very good, yes. This is a good question somebody has.
Isn't UBI going to encourage laziness? People are going to be making money regardless if they work or not.
I say ligma balls,
by the way.
Okay. So, yeah, of course. Honestly, let's talk about that. There's gonna be a level of increased laziness for sure. But like I said, we're seeing jobs being offset rapidly. I don't think anybody can truly live on $1,000 a month other than marginally in most areas. So I'm not seeing it as a huge issue. I'd argue most people actually do want to work and they want to consume. I don't think it would make a, like I said, there was a study done that it showed that there was a reduction in desired work hours met. Or desired work hours, but it didn't cause people to flat out quit their jobs, right? It just gave them a more of a security blanket. Let's see. All right. What's up, Young Silvers? You have a question about UBI? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. What you got?
Okay.
Do you have any questions about UBI specifically?
Yeah, so, alright, so I'm poor, right? I live in a poor neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think UBI, how do you think, like, UBI would affect, like a poor neighborhood? I just want to know, like, specifics.
So
Like,
specifically, I think a UBI would have a drastically positive effect on poor communities. So I would say that one of the biggest issue in poor communities is the fact that there simply aren't opportunities in those communities. If you implement a UBI, it's going to not only give money to individuals, it's going to incentivize businesses to come into the area. It's going to incentivize small businesses to actually be created. It's going to provide more jobs and opportunity in areas in a streamlined way. Rather than being dependent on some kind of a factory moving into your town for employment. So I think it's going to have a very, very, very positive impact. It's going to reduce overall crime numbers, increase opportunity. It's going to galvanize families. It's going to make people be able to turn away from welfare and the welfare trap. And yeah, I think
like my mom, she's on unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
She's been on unemployment for like a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
And like we don't have enough money for like necessities and stuff. Like getting gas for her car sometimes is hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's
Yeah, no, like I said, I think that your mom would actually be able to find a job in a world with UBI.
Yeah, no, because like the jobs in my neighborhood are only like delis and like very low paying jobs that won't really have an effect.
Right, yeah.
So we're kind of like stuck.
Yeah, right. So your mom would be able to take the UBI over the unemployment, and then she would actually be able to find a job, even if it's not a very high paying job. She'd still be able to get a job and not have to worry about losing her UBI. It's unconditional. This way, she can keep both. So yeah.
Okay. So like UBI would just be like an addition of income
Yeah.
to a job.
It would just be you just flat income to everybody, and then you can get a job on top of that.
Okay. I discussed this with my teacher, and he doesn't really agree with it, like everyone getting money.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has like a very conservative aspect.
That's fair.
He's conservative, so I guess that's like probably the main reason.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, let me move on to other questions, my man. Thank you for the question.
All right. Bye. I love you. I love the question.
Love you too. Thank you. All right, Lord King Bomb, what you got for me? Got any UBI questions? Hello?
Oh, hello. Yeah, it's very weird because I'm listening to like the live stream and I'm
That's no
going over
problem.
here. Yeah.
So what you got for me? What's your
So
concern with UBI?
my concern with UBI is, you touched on it a little bit. It's the you give people $1,000 a month, and then big people on the top are like, "Oh, we're making more money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I'm losing money now because President Gut just slashed my income a little bit.
We talking about
Ouch."
people at the top?
Yeah, you pointed out that
Oh yeah,
they
like I
would
would
they would
increase. I could
offset.
potentially
Yeah,
increase. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, well, that's. I mean, what are they going to do about it? You know, like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not too concerned with people at the top making less money and having less wealth overall, since there is quite an issue of wealth hoarding.
my thing would be then that, let's say this UBI thing, there's always going to be two sides to it, and I'm still formulating my thoughts over it. And thank you for pointing out the pros and cons. Um, I would say, let's say let's say you're president, then your administration ends, and then somebody who doesn't believe in UBI comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and his agenda is to take it away. At that point, what are the pros and cons there? Like, could he even do that without like
No, I don't think that it's.
destroying the kingdom?
I don't think it's possible. Right. So right now, a lot of people don't like welfare. I don't particularly care for welfare either. But you can't remove welfare overall because we're dependent on it. So we would become dependent on a universal basic income. Of course. Now you could see that as a positive or a negative thing. I see it as a positive because it offsets technologies. But I don't think that you could just come and be like, all right, UBI is gone. Like there would be no way for people making like an extra $12,000 a year. There would be no way that they would even elect somebody that would take it away, unless it somehow was so bad that they needed to get rid of it. But I would argue that that would not happen. So I don't think that that's a reasonable. I wouldn't say that's a concern.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I guess that was, yeah, because I mean, you have the UBI. Oh, that's another thing. I thought, I don't know, maybe this was a live stream, but before, when you were in your car.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is to implement the UBI. You have this welfare. Slowly get rid of the welfare,
Yes.
or
So
just keep it
it
two
would
options.
be, you can maintain it as an option, but basically you'd be either welfare or UBI. So it would be getting people off of welfare. Would we be able to completely eradicate all other welfare services? Maybe, maybe not, but it would get most people off of those welfare services.
I see. Alrighty, I'm gonna let more people
All right, man.
get their questions answered.
Thank you for the question. Peace.
No problem. Have a nice day.
Somebody mentioned, what if the abusers in an abusive relationship force their partner or the person they're with to give them their money? It's possible. I would argue that you would first of all see less abusive relationships, because the reality is that a lot of this abuse comes from lack of finances and financial stress. But also, I would say, like, if that even happened, which I don't think it would happen in every situation, you're still at square one on that one thing. You haven't actually made it worse. You've made it better overall anyway. I'd say most people would still be able to run away if they needed to. Some people don't understand that, like, some of these abusive relationships are young LGBT people that once they hit 18 will be able to just dip, grab a bus, and get the fuck out of there. And it would actually allow, and this is something I touched on, it would allow for the natural idea of, like, segregation. I know it sounds silly. We shouldn't have any mandated segregation, but different people of different identities feel more comfortable around each other. And this would probably happen, a bunch of LGBT people would rather live in a community with other LGBT individuals, because they feel more comfortable with themselves. They would now have still economic flow for them to focus on what they want to do. You understand what I'm saying? So, like, I don't see it as necessarily a negative overall. All right, let's see. Let's get this next question. I think Magoozle was in here. What's up, Magoozle? You got a UBI specific question?
Oh, Papa, I just wanted to say, I like your Santa costume.
Thank you. Do you have a
Bye.
UBI? Okay, bye. All right, let's get Resist in here. What's up, Resist? Do you have a specific UBI question?
Hey, Papa, what's going on?
Not much, man. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm sorry what happened to you last night.
Oh yeah, it's no problem. Yeah, it is what it is. Did you have a UBI question? I'll totally.
do.
Yeah, what you got for me?
So I saw something in the chat that somebody asked. I'm not sure if you saw it or not. Do you agree on a sort of stipulation for someone who makes a higher amount of income per year to possibly remove them from the UBI?
I mean, you
So
could.
like, let's say they
do it.
make over a certain, like, let's say $100,000 a year.
Yeah, I would say
They wouldn't
I would say like $250,000 to $300,000, right? Would be where my realm would be, and potentially you could do that. But again, it's like you could do it or you could not, and you could increase like some kind of taxes on people over a certain amount of money. It's one of those things where like there's a way to offset that, so I'm not super concerned. But like, yeah, for sure, you can implement like a cap on who would or wouldn't receive a universal basic income. You could.
Okay.
I would say I'd rather not, and then just increase taxes on people in particular brackets.
Okay, yeah.
But like it's like it doesn't necessarily matter for like the majority of Americans. It's like one of those kind of like smaller things. But yeah, no, it's definitely something to consider.
Okay. And then I had another one. Now would that be considered, let's say, so you know how certain disabilities and stuff can't be considered taxable income? Would UBI sort of fall under that as well?
It would be not a completely non-taxable income.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have to report it on tax reports or anything like that.
Nope. It would just be untaxable.
That would help with. Okay, that's perfect. All right, that's pretty much all I had.
Yeah. All right. Very poggers.
All right. Later.
Take care. Let's see. What's up, Dr. Poopsock? You got a UBI specific question?
Wait, hello?
Hello? Do you have a UBI question?
Yeah.
What you got for me?
Do you think like UBI, I overall think it's a net positive, but do you think it could be like a step in encouraging communism?
I mean, sure, it probably is a step, right? So yeah, I mean, it would be. Now, I'm not a communist. I don't like communism, but here's my take. Yeah, here's my take, right? I think that we have particular issues in society that we need to deal with as they come up. One of those issues is like wealth disparity, as well as the fact that you're seeing, well, part of that is jobs disappearing, driving down of wages. So this is a way for us to recontextualize the implementation of new technologies, right? So I see that it's the best step forward because the alternative to me is just expanding welfare, which isn't a good thing. Would it be a step towards communism? Possibly. Maybe in the future that is the best way to go years from now, right? But like, there's a difference between like communists who think that we need some kind of like anarchy communism. What is it called? Like revolution communism, right? And that's how we get there. Yeah. And people who are like, yeah, let's just slowly implement different changes until we get there, right? If 100 years from now, that's what happens, I don't give a shit, right? As long as it's done the right way, which would have to be but it's probably not going to happen because like, look at the world. Like, you're not going to see everybody hive mind onto communism. But you can make the argument. I just don't think it's anywhere near what true communism is because it's still maintained. I believe in class structures. I believe that there are people who are better for society and people who aren't. And I think that the people who are better for society should be able to make more and live more comfortably, and the people who aren't as good for society should still be able to live comfortably enough and like not, be miserable. And that's my idea of creating a ground floor of poverty for universal basic income while maintaining class structure. I just want to see a less of a disparity between classes. Yeah. Poggers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, did you have any other UBI questions?
No, that was really it.
All right, my man. Thank you for the questions. Peace. Let's see, King Connor, what you got for me? Got any UBI specific questions?
Hey, Papa. Let me pause the stream. Okay.
Okay.
My question was, where was the money going to come from? Because I just remember hearing that it would be like $4 trillion or something. Where's that money going to come from?
Yeah, so I started off with it. It's about $3 trillion a year, between a value-added tax, economic, like there's about $800 billion collected from a value-added tax of 10%. That's the projections. Then there's about $800 to $900 billion a year increase just from money cycling through the economy. You're going to have all this money going through the economy. People are going to be buying stuff. You're still going to have to pay taxes on things that you buy and whatnot. So there's a projection of $800 to $900 billion a year from that. And then there's getting people off of welfare, which has a projection of about $400 billion a year. But then there's also an estimated $100 to $200 billion a year reduction in the necessity of services for like homeless people, prison services, and the like of that, ER particular services. So you're seeing roughly roughly about $2.5 trillion of the $3 trillion be cut off between those three. Then there's other conversations of how do we get the other $500 billion. Trump we could literally reverse the Trump tax cuts, and that's another $350 billion. So now we're dealing with $150 billion a year increase, which is something that we can deal with from in ways of like getting departments in the government to be more efficient. The military the military doesn't actually this is for instance, the military doesn't actually spend all its money. What happens is if they don't use it, they lose it, so they're forced to spend it on bullshit at the end of the year. So it's like anywhere from $50+ billion a year that the military is spending just to maintain their you know what I'm talking about, the amount of money that they get. Why can't I think of the word? Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? So we can there's ways that we can figure out how to make the government more efficient. And I would argue that streamlining services, like getting welfare programs cut down, is one of those, because you have less micromanagement when it comes to UBI versus the other. I think there are 100+ other welfare programs that we can substantially cut down and phase out. Do you have any other questions?
No, that's all I had. Thanks.
All right, no problem, man. Take care.
And sorry if you already covered that.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Some people came in late.
Okay, peace out, Papa.
Peace. All righty. Oop, what the hell did I just do? What the fuck? Let's see. What's going on, my man? Do you have a UBI specific question?
I do indeed.
What do you got for me, my man?
I'm considering I'm British. I'm kind of out of the loop of American politics, so I was actually quite intrigued. So I wanted to know what are the genuine practicalities of ever actually being implemented. So let's say that the time period in which that it could be implemented in, or even the scope of the reality of it. Because it's a very.
Do you mean from the context of how long would it take to implement a UBI? Like let's say or how many years until the society would accept the UBI?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that we're getting there very quickly. I think that in the next 10 years, maybe 15 years, we could legitimately see a universal basic income. People are starting to actually consume it, both progressives and conservatives, slowly. I honestly, at least in America, I honestly see it being implemented in the next decade or two. I think it's practical.
That's interesting. And also another thing was obviously there is in America, I realize that there's a lot of kind of money which people have to use in family households for certain basic necessities.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's the purpose of the universal basic income to try and alleviate some financial burden?
Oh yeah, sorry.
That the entire purpose?
Yeah, that's pretty much the entire purpose, to alleviate financial burden, as well as to, value people as much as they should be valued. There's a ton of wealth hoarding at the top in America. I think we're the worst, first world country when it comes to our wealth disparity. It's actually insane. So it's a way to deal with that while creating a poverty floor for individuals who may not be able to contribute to society in the same way as people who can, and also provide opportunity for people who may actually be able to contribute to society but have never had the opportunity, whether it was from school or the like, to be able to rise up to that point.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, just forgetting. And then there's also the conversation about now it's going to allow people to actually do more of what they may want to do. Now that we're turning towards an economy that's based on robotics and different AIs and technologies that would phase out traditional jobs that may be considered more necessary, right? You're going to see more artists, more cake bakers, more, people of those sorts.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. When we implement it, you just have to come on over, right?
Yeah, of course. 100%. Everything going on now is just
Yeah, it's
crazy.
A fucking shit show, right?
Exactly.
All
right, thank you.
No problem, man. Thank you for the question.
No problem.
All right, next up. What's going on, my man? You got any UBI specific questions?
I just had to mute the stream.
No problem.
Yeah, I had a question.
What up?
What can make you eligible for UBI?
Being 18 is it?
That's the only requirement?
Yeah, and an American citizen, yeah. Well, being 18 and being in America legally would be the requirement.
So it doesn't matter on how much money you make a year.
No, and that was a concern someone else brought up. They asked about some kind of a cap on when you would stop it, and you could probably implement something at the $250,000 a year range. But I would argue that it's kind of an irrelevant thing when you could kind of make up for that by increasing taxes on individuals, like such as like a wealth tax. So like it doesn't necessarily matter if you did ever limit on who does or doesn't get a UBI.
All right, that's all I wanted to know. That was one thing puzzling me.
No problem, man.
All right.
Peace. What's going on, my man? You got a question specifically to universal basic income? Hello. There we go.
All right, I just had to meet the stream.
No problem, my man.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm nervous talking to you.
No
You're, like, my
worries.
favorite streamer.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but don't be nervous. What's up?
So I just like if the UBI was given to like the 1% or like in that range, like how would they be taxed?
Yeah, so that's a conversation I think more for economists than anything else. Like we obviously have to get some of that wealth out of that area, right? Wealth tax, like I would say a pretty light wealth tax could absolutely be a way to get money out from there. I've read some articles about economists talking about how there's there's ways around a wealth tax that are probably better off, like some kind of stock tax or something.
Yeah.
I don't know the specifics, but I would say that there's a way to get some of that wealth at the top. I would say a wealth tax. But there may be other ways to do it. But it's basically just getting money from the top, out from the top, whatever economists or, whatever think is the best way to go.
All right. And I just have a second question. So like I'm Canadian, so I'm not so sure on like lots of like American like immigration and stuff and like illegal immigration. But I don't know if you've touched this or not, but like how would it, stop illegal immigration if there was a UBI?
So it wouldn't stop it, but it would decentivize it, right?
Yeah.
Because so right now, some of the jobs that illegal immigrants perform, right? Those are jobs like dishwashers or lower paying jobs that like Americans are too snooty to do. Right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden and they don't pay well. So all of a sudden you got like an $8 an hour job. What are you making? Like I don't know, $1,200, $1,300 a month. So like people would be like, okay, well now I'm going to get $2,300 a month instead of $1,300 a month. So maybe I'll do that job. I think that you brought up an excellent concern, though. This isn't something I touched on because I forgot about it. Is that what happens if those jobs are still not performed or desirable, and now people who are here illegally now can't actually afford to live here because they don't have a UBI? That's a problem that we could potentially see, is the dependency on some illegal immigrants in the United States and the the mentalities of Americans here to not want to perform those specific jobs. And then that's something that we may have to deal with.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing, which means that we would honestly have to have a conversation about making all illegal immigrants in the United States legal, one shot off, and then just being incredibly intense on illegal immigration after that. But that's a whole other thing.
All right, thank you so much. I just drew you a Santa gun and posted it on my TikTok.
Okay, well, tag me in it, all right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, thanks for the question. Take care.
But
one more. What's going on, my man? You have any UBI specific questions?
Yeah, what's going on, Papa? How you doing?
Not bad, man. How you doing?
I had to come home really because I was sick, but I got happy. I saw y'all stream.
Well, I'm sorry you're sick, but I'm happy you're here. How's that?
Oh, hell yeah.
So what you got for me? UBI stuff?
Yeah, I do. So my question is, so let's say you're a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you probably make about $40,000 a year. You have about Now, for that specific individual, would you give them, say, the basic UBI is $1,000? Would you consider giving her an upgrade, or is it just your standard? Everybody's the same, no matter what?
Yeah, so it would be the standard. Everybody's the same, $1,000 a month. I would argue that that's probably more than she may have been getting before on some kind of food stamps. But yeah, no, it would be like the standard $1,000 a month, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah. I still think it would be. I think it would be overall beneficial. There are specific people who may not benefit as much as others, but overall, I would say that not just the money is the incentive, There's conversations as to, well, why were they single? It might, I mean, I know it's silly, but it might prevent there being more single mothers because money is usually a huge stressor in relationships. So you may see more of a, preventative and even single mothers or even single fathers in particular areas due to that. Sometimes it's just an unfortunate negative for some people, or not even a negative, just not as much of a positive as it could be.
Okay. I have one more question.
Yeah, shoot.
Let's say you're president, you want to establish what tax cuts? We know there have to be a lot of tax.
What did you say? What tax cuts or what?
Yeah, what tax cuts?
I don't.
Yeah, like what tax cuts would you use?
Oh, do you mean tax increases?
Yeah, like what would you increase on taxes?
Yeah,
what,
so
programs would you defund? I should say.
Well, the idea that the defunding would mostly come from like the welfare programs getting like phased out essentially due to like the alternative of UBI. There's value-added tax at about 10% is one of the implemented tax. I would say that right now I would reverse Trump's tax cuts as well, because that extra $10 a check you might be getting now is going to be replaced with about $250. So you're not even going to need it. You're not going to need the trickle-down economics of like our current society to the degree that Trump had exacerbated them. So like that, all of that brings us to like $200 billion increase to our deficit a year, which is very manageable in other ways, especially if we actually not necessarily increase corporate taxes, but reduce tax cut loopholes for corporations. We could definitely get that money back.
Okay, I see. Okay, all right. This is the big double H, by the way.
It's the big. Oh, what's up, man?
yeah. I gotta get out here, get back in your chat.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy you slid in, my man.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right, peace out. All right, one last question. Big Mike, what's going on, my man? What you got for me? UBI specific.
Hey, Papa.
What
so
up?
I was wondering if everybody is getting this $1,000 monthly, would it cause small businesses to raise their prices on like food and small things? And it seems like it would be beneficial for the economy, but it also seems like it would kind of eliminate the purpose of this UBI, because these people that didn't have that much money before, their prices are still going to be too much for them to pay for.
Right. So I understand what you're saying. So I don't know this, because the small business specific thing you brought up, I think it could be raised more to like overall, right? I mean, like overall businesses are going to raise prices for sure. The question isn't will they raise prices or will there be some level of inflation? The question is how bad would it be? I would argue that there's no way that the prices are going to be raised to such a degree that's going to completely offset the positives of a UBI. Like I said before, there's a projected the projected inflation increase would be about 6% from a 10% value-added tax, and then of course some places will increase their prices due to there being more economic flow. What I would say though is that most people receive about $400 a month in welfare. That's the average welfare recipient receives $400 a month. So, and with that, not only do they get more from a UBI, but there's going to be more of an incentive for businesses to move into particular areas now, because they're like, oh, look, there's tons of money there, right? You got millions of dollars going into even poor areas, which is going to reduce that crime. But it's going to reduce that crime and also allow small businesses to start up and big businesses to move in to start to get some of that wealth, obviously. So you're going to see more job opportunities and overall drastic increase in the amount of money that individuals can actually make. And since the money's unconditional, there's not going to be any, decentive from working. The biggest issue would probably be people who stayed on welfare. As far as the cost of living, the cost of the increase. Oh, and I touched on it before, but like I had talked about the difference between like the market and like living space increases. So for instance, like you go to like McDonald's, they're not going to drastically increase their prices because then some other competitor would just keep their prices lower and they would siphon up more of the money. Like you're not going to see drastic increases when it comes to like the market in that context. Food and clothes are already exempt from the value-added tax. The biggest problem you'll see is like when it comes to renters renting for a lot more money. You could implement something, basically some form of rent control that says you can't increase your rent by this and this amount, because I think that's really where the money would have the biggest issue, is like really greedy property owners trying to siphon that money. But if you're going to do that, obviously we just step in and say, hey, you can't increase by more than 10% in the first year and 5% every year after that. Something like that. That's just like the free ball off the top of my head. But there's ways to deal with those types of issues. But like I said before, the issue with people on welfare, There's possibly. I think that there could be an argument to be made. A potential solution to that could be like, okay, anybody on welfare right now or just coming off of welfare for the first year gets like an extra $200 a month, right? Again, I'm just freeballing it, but like you could implement a solution like that to help the people who may need it the most while they are able to readjust to what's going on. Because yeah, it might take them a little time to find a job, but then like you're gonna see jobs like shuffling into those areas within like the first year. Like these businesses are gonna jump on top of moving in there because there's gonna be so much money. Like I know it sounds silly, but you're gonna see things like McDonald's are like, oh, I'm gonna go into this area. McDonald's, they're gonna pop into that area. They're gonna create jobs not only to build those restaurants, but then also they need people to work for those restaurants. And then there's a lot of economic flow. You're gonna see tons of different industries come into there to sell, what'll create more jobs. So it's honestly, with the UBI, the market, UBI plus the free market is going to mitigate most of those negatives. And then, of course, there's going to still be those few that'll still be on welfare, whether they want to or they feel like they have to be. And we could deal with that when it comes. So I'd say the majority of society would like drastically benefit from this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, but I have one more quick thing.
Sure.
So if there's a UBI, welfare will still be a thing. It won't be eliminated.
It won't be completely eliminated. It would be an opt-in. So you can either have the UBI or the welfare. And the idea is to get people off of welfare. But they're not going to completely eliminate it unless we got to a place where it could be completely eliminated safely. But I wouldn't be like, oh, done. No, it's a slow transition. Like there's probably going to always be some people that would prefer welfare, whether it's due to some kind of laziness, honestly, or some necessity. So, but like it would be drastically reduced. Like it would be drastic reduction in those welfare programs because most people will just take $1,000 a month, like, drama free.
Okay. Thank you, Papa. Appreciate it.
No problem, man. Take care.
You too.
All right. We got a couple more questions. Let's see. What's going on, my man? You got any UBI specific questions?
Yeah. Did you read the Andrew Yang book on the UBI?
No, I didn't even know you had one. That's great. Maybe I should pick it up.
Well, a lot of the stuff you talked about in the beginning was basically kind of same figurative stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, I went through a lot of Yang specific points, and then I went through my own talking points for sure. Like I even mentioned in the beginning that this is like a derivative of Yang. Some of the things I would change. I actually forgot to touch on it. Like some form or some way in the future to eliminate the value added tax would probably be a positive, since it does like disproportionately hurt people who are poor. But overall, I think it's a great plan.
It's a great book. It's called The War on Normal People.
Really? Hey, maybe I'll pick it up. Maybe that's be my Christmas gift.
Love you, Papa.
I love you too, man. Take care. All right, Lord King Bomb, you're back again. What you got for me? You're gonna be my last question.
All right, came back again from the dead. Yeah. Okay. My question is, can you repeat again? I didn't get all of it. I joined like when you were saying how would you pay for the UBI? Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I touched on it a couple times, but so basically there's 3 overall ways. The first is value-added tax. That's $800 billion. Well, it's a $3 trillion headline cost. So value-added tax, $800 billion. Economic increase due to all this money going through it, $800 to $900 billion. Getting people off of welfare is estimated about $400 billion, but then there's an estimated $100 to $200 billion when it comes to getting people off of homeless services and the like from that, reduction in poverty, homeless services, fewer people in prisons. That's going to reduce overall. So we're basically going to almost $2.5 trillion paid towards the $3 trillion. And then at that point, reversal of Trump tax cuts, and then you could tighten up other things. And we're down to about $200 to $300 billion at this point, increased deficit per year. And so we can very quickly start cutting down on those things and to get UBI to pay for itself.
I see.
So it's practical.
I would say, because you talked about how this would affect different groups and areas of society.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask how does this affect, like, I would say people going into college or
UBI, I think it's a huge benefit. So they're basically, for people going to college, it'll allow them to potentially not only be able to pay for it without having to take a loan out, but it'll also maybe allow them to not even have to work, which will allow them to have a much higher success rate going through college, and like especially in like lower income individuals who like will usually need to not only go to school, but like they need to work to support their family at the same time. So this is, I think, fantastic for people going to like high school or college rather, overall.
I would say if a scenario goes down and where the schools bump up the prices because of that.
Oh, okay. Do you be concerned with that? So right now, and this is like an Andrew Yang thing, I'm totally on board with it. Right now, Andrew Yang's plan to reduce the cost of schools is to say, listen, we give you all government subsidies. If you want those subsidies, you need to get your costs in line with like more of the average cost, and most of that's administrative costs. So I wouldn't be so worried about about schools just being like, fuck it, let's increase prices. As long as the government's like, hey, you want our money, then you need to do this, and if you don't, we just won't give you money, and then they won't be able to succeed. So they're going to have to adhere to what the government says. He actually goes into a bit of depth about how he would deal with the student loan debt crisis in general, and expanding on that, he would do that to lower prices rather than give everybody free school, because it makes more sense to like lower the prices since the government's already subsidizing a ton of schooling. But then also do like a 10 for 10, like he'll buy up all the debt, 10 for 10 forgiveness program. So if you pay 10% of your check for the next 10 years, you know, then you would be able to do your thing. So
I would pay 10% of my check.
Yeah, no, if you had school debt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, you're not paying 10%. If you don't have school debt, you're not paying shit. The government would buy up the debt. They would implement a 10 for 10. If you paid it off, great. If you couldn't pay it off, then, you know, whatever. And then they would also lower the price of school. It's basically like a soft reset. You lower the price of schools. You allow people to alleviate their debt through a 10 for 10 program. And then like you kind of go forward with like a drastically lowered cost of schooling. So, you know, of course, some taxpayers would have to pick up some of the bill for people, but like at least there's a way to reduce the cost of school moving forward. It's more of like a practical solution because we do have like crippling the debt. It's like $1.5 trillion in our economy, and actually does hurt the economy and like our the flow of money through the economy. So
I think I'm gonna go final question right now. How much? Okay, I'm gonna put it just so people can best comprehend it. I'm making $1,000. Let's say a month. Yeah. Yes. Without the UBI. I know I'll get the UBI. How much do I have to pay in taxes under?
Yeah, like we said, it would basically be evaluate. So it'd be a 10% increased tax on everything, on like consumer products outside of, you know, unprepared food and clothing. Okay. So the iPhone, you know, if it would be instead of $400, it'd be $440, and you just be like, "Fuck you, iPhone! I'm gonna go buy something cheaper." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, and I heard, and you're gonna have like these taxes so you can incentivize people to be healthier, right?
Oh yeah, I've touched on that. That comes to mind because I'm also somebody who believes in some kind of single payer healthcare system while maintaining a private insurance. I talk about like health taxes as well. Like honestly, like we need a sugar tax, I think, in the United States, and even like a fast food tax. But that's a whole other story, to be honest with you. I mean, honestly, you could probably forego even doing some kind of healthcare if we implemented those taxes and just used them to pay for UBI and just said, listen, if you're healthier, you're less costly, and you can just go get your own private insurance if you want. You know, we could. I mean, like I'm pretty on board with like some kind of universal healthcare system that maintains a private insurance, but UBI might actually reduce the necessity of even needing universal healthcare. Honestly.
Interesting.
So.
All right. Oh yeah, I left a comment in one of your YouTube videos. Are you gonna for like Christmas? Are you gonna dye your hair? Like,
yeah, I gotta
beard white?
I gotta get. I have some like temporary beard whitening at you know, at my girlfriend's house. I gotta go grab it. So hopefully tomorrow, I might make this like a daily thing where I come on stream, or at least for my podcast where I come on as Santa. So we'll see.
Nice.
I know, right?
All right,
my man. Thank you for the questions.
No problem.
Take care.
You too.
We have another person in here. What's up, Tyler? What you got for me? Any UBI specific questions?
Yeah. So I always I gotta mute this stream real quick. Sorry. There we go. I liked Yang. I was a huge like supporter of him. I have his sweatshirt and whatever, but I've kind of discover that I feel like there's things that are more important than UBI, like a universal healthcare system, especially because, you know, like one time I went to the ER to just like get something checked out, nothing that would have costed any money, and the bill was like $1,400.
Well, what'd you get
And like
checked out?
I have pretty good healthcare, and it was still like $1,400.
Oh, you're saying the healthcare was bullshit? Yeah,
like, I'm just imagining like people that are poor, and you know, I feel like everyone that should be the number one concern is that like everybody gets healthcare, and like I feel like UBI would be good for other things, but I feel like there's other things that should come first.
Well, I think that UBI could
Like,
actually.
what do you?
Yeah, so I think.
Do you think that UBI is the most important thing?
So I think that UBI could probably help with healthcare. I think a lot of people though in their mind is like, yeah. Okay.
Hello?
You good? Hello? Hello?
I can't hear you.
All right, just pop the stream back on. All right. So I'm just going to answer the question. Just knock back into the stream. So basically, you can hear me? Okay, I'm going to pop you into the channel. I'm going to answer your question this way I don't hear myself through the thing. Okay. All right, so to that, personally, I'm somebody, I just touched on this whole, a little bit on it, how like this UBI could actually potentially offset the necessity of needing some kind of universal healthcare. However, most people do believe that like a universal healthcare system is the next step. I would like to maintain private insurance through it, but like most people feel that way. By the time I'm like, you know, potentially in office, or let's just say by the time that UBI actually is something that that's consumable for people to actually want to support, we'll probably have some kind of universal healthcare system anyway. So, yeah, there you go. I'm going to end this segment now. I got to take this freaking hat off. Woo! There we go, baby. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't look the same without the hat. I appreciate everybody. That will conclude this podcast. I want to say thank you so much, guys, to all my Patreons, and a special shout out to my Papa XL Patreons. Without all you guys, I would just be some fat dude screaming into a microphone. So thank you so much, guys. Mwah. I love you all.
I want Papa God to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.